I sacrificed my rising career to nurse my dying mother, only to discover forged medical bills in the trash proving she was never sick. Instead of confronting her privately, I organized a prestigious charity auction for a fake miracle cure to trap her in front of the entire city. This is a story of family betrayal and justice. My name is Gabriella Gonzalez. For the last 2 years, I have lived in a state of suspended animation, a purgatory of my own making, defined by the smell of antiseptic, the sound of a ringing bedside bell, and the crushing weight of impending grief. I was 34 years old, a woman who had once stood on the precipice of becoming a partner at one of Chicago's most prestigious architectural firms. I had a life that vibrated with energy. I had a loft in the West Loop, a boyfriend named Mark who looked at me like I was the sun, and a future that felt limitless. And then, with a single phone call, I dismantled it all. The call had come on a Tuesday. I remember it was raining. My mother, Elena, had called me, her voice trembling, a sound so unlike her usual commanding tone that my blood ran cold before she even spoke the words. She told me it was pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors had given her 6 months, maybe a year if she was lucky. She was alone in our family home in Florida, a sprawling Mediterranean estate that felt too big even when my father was alive. And now, she said, it felt like a mausoleum. I didn't hesitate. I didn't think about my promotion or the project I was leading. I didn't think about Mark or the life we were building. I thought only of duty. In my culture, you do not abandon your parents. You sacrifice. You serve. It is the unwritten law of blood. Within 2 weeks, I had sublet my apartment, taken an indefinite leave of absence that eventually turned into a resignation, and moved back into my childhood bedroom in Florida. The first year was a blur of emotional torture. My mother was not an easy patient. She had always been a woman who thrived on attention, a former beauty queen who had never quite accepted the fading of the spotlight. Sickness, I soon learned, was her new stage. She was frail, demanding, and prone to dramatic episodes of weeping, where she would clutch my hands and beg me not to let her die alone. I became her nurse, her cook, her chauffeur, and her emotional punching bag. I spent my savings on organic treatments she insisted upon. I sold my car to pay for specialists who didn't take insurance. I cut off contact with my friends because I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to explain why I was still stuck in Florida watching my mother fade away. Mark and I broke up 4 months in. He tried to be supportive, but the distance and my total consumption by my mother's needs eroded us until there was nothing left. I grieved him, but I pushed it down. I told myself my mother was dying and my petty heartbreak didn't matter. But as the months turned into 2 years, the cracks began to show. They were small at first, tiny inconsistencies that I brushed away because the alternative was too horrifying to consider. The first incident that truly unsettled me happened on a Thursday afternoon. I had gone out to the pharmacy to pick up her pain medication, heavy-duty opioids that she claimed were the only thing keeping the agony at bay. When I returned earlier than expected, I walked into the kitchen to find her standing at the counter. She wasn't using her cane. She wasn't hunched over in the performative posture of pain she adopted whenever I was in the room. She was reaching for a heavy cast-iron skillet on the top shelf, standing on her tiptoes, her movements fluid and strong. When she heard the door click, she dropped the pan. It clattered onto the counter with a deafening bang. Immediately, she crumpled to the floor, clutching her side, wailing about a sudden spasm. I rushed to her, guilt washing over my suspicion. I helped her to bed, apologized for startling her, and fetched her ice packs. But that image of her reaching for the skillet, her spine straight and strong, stayed with me. Then there was the money. My father had left her well off, but she constantly claimed poverty. She told me the medical bills were draining the accounts. She told me the insurance company was denying claims. I started dipping into my own 401k, liquidating the assets I had worked a decade to build. I handed over checks for thousands of dollars to cover holistic treatments from a doctor named Dr. Thorne, a specialist she insisted on seeing privately. She never let me come into the exam room with her. She said he was old-fashioned and preferred to speak to the patient alone. I sat in the waiting room, reading outdated magazines, trusting her implicitly. The unraveling happened on a Monday morning. It was trash day. Usually, I handled everything, but my mother had been oddly insistent on taking out the recycling from her home office herself the night before, claiming she wanted to feel useful despite her frailty. I had watched her from the window, dragging the bin to the curb with a surprising amount of vigor, but again, I dismissed it. The next morning, a stray dog knocked the bin over. Cans and papers were strewn across the wet driveway. I went out to clean it up, annoyed but resigned. A piece of bright yellow paper caught my eye. It was crumpled up tight, hidden inside an empty cereal box that had burst open. I uncrumpled it. It was an invoice from a graphic design freelancer. The description read, "Creation of medical letterhead, oncological report templates, and billing statements." I stared at the paper. The rain was starting to spot the ink, blurring the edges, but the words were clear. I felt a strange buzzing in my ears. I dug through the rest of the trash. I found another ball of paper.
If you are enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment, as your feedback helps to improve the stories coming.
This one was a draft of a medical bill from Dr. Thorne, but it had handwritten notes in the margins in my mother's distinct, loopy script. Notes like, increase amount to $5,000 and add late fee. I sat there on the wet concrete of the driveway, the rain soaking through my pajamas. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just that she was lying, it was the effort, the calculation. She had hired a graphic designer. She had drafted fake bills. She had been systematically draining my finances, stealing my future, and holding my heart hostage with a disease she didn't have. I walked back into the house. It was quiet. She was still asleep, or pretending to be. I went into her office. I had never snooped before. I respected her privacy, but that day, I tore that room apart. I found the lockbox in the back of her closet. It wasn't locked. Inside were bank statements from an account I didn't know existed. It was filled with the money I had given her. Transfers, cash deposits. The balance was over $200,000. And then, the kicker, a calendar. On the dates she supposedly had chemotherapy, she had written things like spa day at the Breakers or lunch with Janice. I stood in the center of that room, shaking. I wasn't sad. I wasn't hurt. I was incinerated. The grief I had carried for 2 years, the career I had torched, the love I had lost with Mark, it was all for a show, a production starring Gabriella Gonzalez, with me as the tragic, devoted supporting actress. I could have walked into her bedroom right then. I could have thrown the papers in her face and screamed until my throat bled. I could have packed my bags and left her there to rot in her lies. But that wasn't enough. Walking away would let her spin the narrative. She would tell everyone I abandoned her in her final days. She would paint me as the villain, the ungrateful daughter who left her sick mother to die alone. She would keep the money. She would keep the sympathy. No, I needed something more final. I needed to burn the stage down with her on it. I spent the next 3 days in a fugue state of planning. I acted the part of the dutiful daughter perfectly. I brought her soup, I fluffed her pillows, I listened to her complain about her agony. But every time she looked away, I was on my phone, organizing. I told her I had found a miracle. I told her I had been researching experimental treatments and had found a revolutionary new drug called Vita Nova, developed by a private research institute in Switzerland. I told her there was a doctor coming to Miami to present it, but the treatment cost a fortune, more than we had left. But don't worry, Mama, I said, holding her hand, looking deep into her eyes. I'm going to organize a gala, a fundraiser. We have so many friends in the community. If we tell them this is your last chance, they'll donate. We can raise the money for the cure." Her eyes lit up. This was her dream scenario, a gala in her honor, a room full of people fawning over her, pitying her, celebrating her bravery. She agreed immediately. She even forgot to fake her limp when she got up to look at her dresses. I used my old connections. I had been an architect, but I knew event planners. I knew PR people. I called in every favor I had. I rented the ballroom at the Biltmore Hotel. I sent out invitations to the creme de la creme of Miami society, her friends, her church group, my old colleagues, everyone who mattered. The hook was irresistible. The Phoenix Gala, a night to save Elena. The preparation took a month. During that time, I played the game. I let her dictate the flower arrangements. I let her choose the music. She was vibrant, energized by the prospect of being the center of attention. She tried on gown after gown, settling on a pale blue silk number that made her look fragile and angelic. She practiced her speech in the mirror, rehearsing her breathless, weak voice. "Thank you all for coming. I am fighting so hard." It was nauseating. Every time she practiced, I visualized the bank statements I had photocopied. I visualized the fake medical bills. I visualized Mark's face the day he walked out the door. The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, towering arrangements of white lilies, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. The room was packed, 300 people. There were local news cameras I had tipped off, promising a heartwarming story of a daughter's love and a medical miracle. My mother sat at the head table in a wheelchair she didn't need, receiving guests like a dying queen. People lined up to hold her hand, to whisper prayers. She soaked it up, dabbing at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. I stood by her side, the dutiful daughter, smiling until my face hurt. "You've done wonderful, Gabriella," one of her friends, Mrs. Alvarez, said to me, clutching my arm. "You are a saint, giving up everything for her. God sees your sacrifice." "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "The truth always comes out eventually." At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. I walked onto the stage. The spotlight hit me, blindingly bright. The room went silent. I adjusted the microphone. "Good evening, everyone," I began. My voice echoed through the massive hall. "Thank you for being here. We are gathered tonight to talk about a miracle." I looked down at the table where my mother sat. She was beaming up at me, looking fragile and expectant. She thought I was about to announce the fundraiser goal. She thought she was moments away from a check for hundreds of thousands of dollars. "For 2 years," I continued, "I have watched my mother battle a terrible enemy. I have watched her suffer. I have watched her fade. I gave up my career, my home, and my relationship to be by her side, because that is what you do for family. You sacrifice everything for the truth." I paused. The room was dead silent. "But sometimes," I said, my tone hardening, "the truth is not what we think it is. Tonight, I promised you a presentation on the miracle cure, Vita Nova. But I have a confession to make. Vita Nova doesn't exist." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. My mother's smile faltered. She shifted in her wheelchair, looking around nervously. "There is no Swiss Institute," I said, my voice rising. "There is no miracle drug, just as there is no cancer." The gasp that sucked the air out of the room was audible. My mother tried to stand up. "Gabriella!" she shrieked, forgetting her weak voice. "What are you doing? She's hysterical! The stress has broken her mind!" "Sit down, Mother," I commanded. I clicked the remote in my hand. Behind me, the massive projection screen that was supposed to show medical diagrams lit up. But it didn't show cells or DNA. It showed the invoice from the graphic designer. "This," I said, pointing to the screen, "is the invoice for the forged medical documents my mother commissioned, dated 2 years ago, the same week she claimed to be diagnosed. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to the bank statements. This is the secret account where she has been funneling the money I gave her for her treatments. $250,000. Money I earned. Money I saved. Stolen. My mother was standing now, screaming, "Turn it off! Someone stop her! She's lying!" She looked around for support, but the guests were frozen, their eyes darting between me and the screen. I clicked the remote again. This was the kill shot. A video. I had installed a nanny cam in the living room 3 weeks ago. The video played on the giant screen. It showed my mother alone in the house. She was blasting salsa music. She was dancing. She was twirling around the living room holding a glass of wine, moving her hips with the agility of a 20-year-old. Then the video showed her picking up her phone. Her voice boomed over the ballroom speakers from the video recording. "Oh, Janice, I can't possibly make it to lunch. I'm simply too weak today. Gabriella is making me broth. Poor girl, she's so gullible. I have her wrapped around my little finger." The silence in the ballroom was total. It was heavy, suffocating. The video ended. I looked at my mother. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was standing there, in her pale blue silk dress, completely exposed. The mask had slipped. The dying woman was gone, replaced by a cornered predator. "You ungrateful brat," she hissed, but the microphone on the podium picked it up. "I gave you life!" "And you tried to consume mine," I said into the mic. "You didn't want a daughter. You wanted a servant. You wanted an audience. Well, look around, Mother. You have your audience." The crowd turned on her instantly. The pity evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard disgust. Mrs. Alvarez, the woman who had called me a saint, stood up and walked over to my mother. She didn't say a word. She just looked at her with pure contempt, turned her back, and walked out of the ballroom. That broke the dam. People began to talk, voices rising in anger. The reporters I had invited were having a field day, flashes going off like lightning. My mother collapsed back into her wheelchair, covering her face with her hands, sobbing. But this time, nobody moved to comfort her. Then came the police. I hadn't just invited society, I had invited the authorities. Fraud is a crime. Soliciting donations for a fake charity is a felony. I had spoken to a detective a week prior, laying out all the evidence I had gathered. They were waiting in the wings. As 2 officers walked onto the floor, the reality of the situation hit my mother. She looked at me, her eyes wide with terror. "Gabriella, please, tell them it's a joke. Tell them." I stepped down from the stage. I walked past the table where she sat. I stopped for just a second. "I'm done playing my part, Mom," I said softly. "The show is over." I walked out of the ballroom, the sound of her wailing rising behind me, mixed with the murmur of the crowd and the clicking of cameras. I walked through the lobby of the Biltmore, out the heavy double doors, and into the humid Miami night. The aftermath was brutal, but it was a brutality I welcomed because it was real. My mother was charged with fraud and grand larceny. The scandal was the talk of the city for months. The Phoenix Gala became infamous. My mother tried to play the victim during the legal proceedings, claiming she had Munchausen syndrome, that she was mentally ill and needed help, not prison. Maybe she was, but the judge wasn't lenient. She was ordered to pay restitution, which meant selling the house, the mausoleum she loved so much. She received a suspended sentence and probation, mostly due to her age, but her social life, the only thing she truly valued, was obliterated. She was a pariah. I didn't stay to watch the fallout. I packed my car the morning after the gala. I took only what was mine. I drove north, watching the palm trees give way to pines, watching the flat horizon turn into rolling hills. It has been 6 months since that night. I am back in Chicago. I didn't get my old job back. That position was filled, but I got a better one. I'm working for a firm that designs sustainable housing, doing work that feels tangible and honest. I saw Mark a few weeks ago. We met for coffee. It was awkward at first. There's a lot of pain there, a lot of time lost that we can't get back. We aren't together, and maybe we never will be again. The damage my mother did to my life has ripples that will take years to settle. But he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You look like yourself again." And I am. I spent 2 years in a prison built of guilt and lies. I let myself be small so my mother could feel big. I sacrificed my happiness to feed her ego. But I learned something valuable in the wreckage. I learned that I am capable of burning a world down to save myself. Yesterday, I got a letter from Florida. It was from her. The envelope was thick. I didn't open it. I didn't even hesitate. I dropped it into the shredder by my desk and watched the paper turn into confetti. I don't need her apologies. I don't need her explanations. And I certainly don't need her drama. I have my own life to build, brick by brick, on a foundation of truth. And this time, I'm the only architect. My name is Gabriella Gonzalez. I faked a charity gala to expose my mother's lies, and in the glare of those spotlights, I finally found my way out of the dark.